This is incredible.
Such a great idea.
How did you come up with this?
It's practically genius.
I'm Lindsay McGuire.
And I'm Ryan Greaves. And this is Practically Genius, an original show from Formstack.
We started by really looking at applications and the productivity and the business performance of applications. But as soon as you do that in the enterprise context, it's not about the application anymore, right? It's about the process, because these applications help enable these sort of complex processes. So that was really the impetus in kind of getting us focused on this operational excellence space, right? And every enterprise we work with, they've got a focus on Six Sigma or Lean or right improving their operations. And the thing that people struggle with is that visibility. How do you improve a business process? Well, in order to improve anything, you've got to be able to measure it, right, first. And a lot of the industrial engineering teams that we work with, or the data science teams that we work with, they spend half their time just wrangling data, right? Trying to kind of get it from 5 different systems and normalize it, and it's such a mess. So we're taking that burden off their hands and integrating the different data streams so we visualize an end-to-end process, and we help them quickly isolate, oh, here's a problem, and now you can do root cause, and you can start using the data to run experiments and fix things instead of just trying to make sense of the data. Right? That was kind of our start.
Yeah, you brought up a really great point. I think about a lot of there's just so much chaos across even similar departments within a team, or teams within a department, I should say, of, well, we use this tool and they use this tool and we're doing this way, and then it does not come together in one solid process. So what got you interested in process improvement? Why is that a passion point of yours?
Yeah, I've always been a data guy, data nerd, so to speak, you could say, even maybe. And I think data has tremendous power to help us sort of transform our thinking, right? So usually, when you're in the middle of something, right, sort of down in the weeds, you're always looking at, well, I'm doing something this way. How could I do it a little bit better, right? Now, it's possible that you could do it a lot better if you were able to take a step back and look at sort of the end-to-end picture to identify things that you don't know the answers to, or things that you didn't even know you could ask, right? That's one of the big challenges with data, right? Like, you can use data to prove anything, right? And if you ask data a question, you'll get an answer back. Right. The challenge that most people have is what questions I should actually be asking, right? Because there's so much data. When you think about, right, if we take the example of a healthcare claim, for instance, right, understanding like all the different steps that a claim goes from initiation to closure, right, whether it gets approved or denied, it could be touched by a dozen different people. And it might be kicked back and forth, escalated up, right? Go back to the subscriber for more information. So there's so much data that it's hard for human mind to really comprehend it, right? Especially if you're talking about, okay, now I've got 1 million claims that I'm processing, right? Not just 1 or 2. So being able to sort of organize that data in a way that it speaks to you was really kind of a passion of mine as we were going down this journey, and and then we've been able to do that to a good extent.
Almost sounds like you're talking about creating a good story with your data, right? And one that speaks to you and your role, your position, whatever you're trying to achieve in your business. I think that's a really powerful way to position that. And I want to go back to something you said too earlier about being able to look at something from the process standpoint versus the application or tool standpoint. I think a lot of people get caught up in what tools am I using, what tool is going to make this work, what tool will make this better, but they forget that it really is the foundation part of that is the process. So what advice do you have for people to be able to switch that thinking away from being so tool-driven, app-driven, and more in that process standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lindsay. When we think about processes, we always think about business objectives, right? So, any engagement that we have with any customer, the first question I always ask is, okay, what are you trying to do, right? What does success look like for you? Do you want to be able to, generate more revenue? Do you want to be able to execute a transaction faster, right? Do you want to cut costs, right? So what is your goal? And I think whether it's in the process improvement context or just running any part of a business context, you've got to be able to then measure that goal in some quantifiable way, right? Because if you can measure it, you can improve it, right? So if I've got applications that support a particular business process, and my goal is that I want to be able to do things, enable execution of a process faster. Now you can kind of go from that process level to the workflows level, right? What are the different ways that work gets done? And you might have, a dozen different ways or 100 different ways that something flows from start to finish. Once you understand those workflows, we can easily identify which ones are your top performing workflows and which ones are your worst performing workflows, right? The ones that take the longest in this case versus the ones that take the shortest time. And once we segment by these poor performing workflows, we can now see how applications interact or support those workflows, right? Where do you have maybe high latency, which applications have more steps than they should. Like, we've even gone down to fields on a form level where, someone might have, 50 fields that a end user has to navigate through to fill out a form to you do something, and maybe 20 of those only ever get used, right? So you should get rid of those other 30 to help speed up that process, to give some sanity back to that user of that application, right? So you can as you sort of zoom down to the application level, and then you can even get down to the feature level, right? To see, okay, well, what features are being used, which ones aren't being used, which ones do I need to maintain versus maybe rationalize or sunset, right? So you can really, once you understand the business objective, you can go through sort of a methodical process to identify, okay, well, what's working and what's not working, and then you can make changes. And as you make changes, you can then measure, well, okay, I made this change, I got rid of this application and replaced it with this application, or I consolidated these features, or I made that screen easier to use. Well, what impact did that have? Did I make things better? Did I make things worse? All right, are they the same? So once you have the ability to actually do that analysis, you can now start to run experiments and see the impact of those experiments. And then rinse and repeat once you get there.
It's funny you bring up that point of the form fields, because I'd be at a disservice not to bring up the fact I do work at Formstack, and I think about these things day in and day out. And just having form fields on a form that are not necessary can really throw such a huge wrench in your processes. So if someone comes into that form and says, oh my gosh, I'm not filling out all this information right now, think about how much time you're delaying that process if it was just capturing that data you needed. And of course, if you're capturing data that's not getting used, it's probably useless data. So I really liked that point. And I want to go back to where you're talking about those workflows that don't work well, those least efficient, least effective workflows. What are some of the issues you and your team see in those kind of less productive workflows, or the ones that are causing those issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really situational. So things that we see the most often are the ping pong effect, where you have work that's going from one department to another department, back to another department, right? That's something that's very common. The other thing that we see often is manual tasks that people have to do to fit. Let's say you have this form that you have to fill out, but I've got to go to like 5 other systems to get data that I'm literally just copying and pasting into that form. So those types of inefficiencies can be solved by using RPA or another form of automation. Oftentimes we'll look at these workflows that take a long time, or things that get suppressed or closed out without being resolved, and we try to do business rule extraction. What about these cases makes them different than the ones that were processed normally? And if we can identify those issues and then define them as rules, now you can do straight through processing, where no one actually has to touch those cases, and we can use automation to process those cases, or we can not even have them create in the first place, maybe, So there's lots of approaches to fixing problems, The first step is really understanding, what is the issue, what is the bottleneck, and then why does that bottleneck exist, Does that bottleneck exist because I need my junior people to have better training than senior people, because or people in the Florida Jacksonville data center do things much better than sort of the Dallas sort of center, So you can analyze these end-to-end workflows, and then our AI engine will analyze the data to sort of say, oh, hey, Dallas is 30 minutes longer in terms of processing these transactions than Jacksonville for XYZ reasons, And now you've got the ability to, use something actionable to make changes.
And you bring up a really good point about how organizations can get stuck with allowing teams or different cities or different branches to process things differently, and that playing a part in why these inefficiencies exist. And somehow it gets lost in communication, collaboration, of being able to share these learnings across each other. So then you're wondering, well, why is this going so smooth and swimmingly over here? And then you look over here and it's like, why is this a dumpster fire? Why do you think that happens? Why do you think organizations get stuck in that lack of communication?
Well, I think it's the world we live in, Like we're especially these days, we're so engrossed in our Zoom lives that everyone's running from one meeting to another, My meetings this morning started at 6 a.m., and I think the last meeting will probably be at like 8:30 or something today at night. So between that time, we're trying to grab lunch or pick up my daughter, whatever it is, that we're trying to do. And in general, people have a pretty good idea of the world around them, So if in my office or the task that I'm responsible for, I have a really good understanding of what that is. But as you start to go outwards from there, like think of sort of the visibility as concentric circles, So the further away those circles are from the task that you're responsible for, you have less and less visibility. And oftentimes, being able to kind of analyze the data in near real time, like our AI engine does, we can spot trends and make predictions much, much faster than a human would be able to, Because by the time data from all the different service centers gets consolidated and gets bubbled up to someone to review, it might be a month later, And now you're looking in the rearview mirror where the world's changed, And my call volume might have gone up in the call center, or there's a new set of product issues that customers are dealing with, and even if you understand that trend a month later, there's not much you can do about it because the world's different, So if I could tell you right away that, hey, I'm seeing this delta, and now you can take a best practice from one area and apply it to the other, you can have immediate impact, on the business.
Immediate impact. Those are lovely words. I love that idea. I want to go back to, you talked about these repetitive tasks people are wasting their time on and this ping pong effect. And it's interesting, we actually are about to launch a report called The State of Digital Maturity, Advancing Workflow Automation. And one thing we found in this survey of 2,000 people in the US was that 51% of people spend at least 2 hours each day. That's each day on those repetitive tasks. And it's taking them away from that impactful work like you were talking about. And so that's kind of like a crazy stat. I mean, that's 10 hours each week? That's at least wasted, if not more, because there were definitely people who said 4 hours a day, and that was scary.
Oh my gosh.
But for the organizations that might alarm them or alert them to there's issues at play here, what do you think, how should they start kind of peeling back that onion and finding out where are these repetitive tasks hiding? Where is all this time going? And how can we become more efficient?
Yeah, it starts with visibility, right? That's always sort of the first step is just understanding how work gets done. People have a sense of how work gets done, right? And it's very rarely accurate, especially when you have processes that touch multiple people or have multiple steps. So getting a quantitative understanding of how work actually gets done within an organization is really the first step that you have to do to be able to then make changes to, change the way work gets done. Right. So if you understand where those ping pong effects are, or why those ping pong effects occur, or maybe they only occur for certain types of orders, right, in order management system versus other types of orders. So understanding that visibility in terms of what's high performing, what's low performing, you can now start to make changes, and then measuring the effect of those changes is just as important. Oftentimes when people do these massive digital transformation exercises, and these projects can go on for months or years, right? They'll have sort of milestone check-ins where, okay, well, we've been doing this for 3 months or 6 months. We put out a major release. Let's try to kind of understand what the impact of that was. My philosophy is that you've got to be able to measure in real time. So with each release of the application, with each new feature that you're introducing, you should be able to quantify the business impact of that feature. Because you've got people doing work, and you can only do that if you have sort of those business goals as a starting point, right? If you're clear on, hey, this is my top goal or my top 2 or 3 goals, now you can start to measure the work that you're doing against those goals. And if my goal was to reduce the cost of processing a claim, and I'm rolling out new capabilities to do that, well, then with each release of my application, I should be able to quantitatively measure how well did I do against that goal. Or did I just put out a new feature and feel good about it, right?
And that does happen. I want to bring this into kind of the internal employee experience as well. How does bringing automation, process improvements, bringing in someone like Pyze or an organization like Pyze and your tools, how can that help the employee experience? What are the impacts of these repetitive tasks and these ping pong effects on people?
Oh, I think they're a huge downer, right? To use a technical term. No one wants to spend time cutting and pasting and doing these manual tasks, or have to kind of resurface something that you'd already pushed forward, right? Like that's not fun. People want to do new things. People want to do things that are challenging and exciting. So being able to sort of introduce these process improvements, enables greater productivity. It's a huge morale booster for people because they understand that the organization has a focus on improving the way that work gets done, right, which has a direct correlation to their quality of work life, which has, again, a direct correlation to the business performing better and the organization running on all six cylinders. So yeah, for sure. Our experience has been that this is like, it's welcomed by everyone. Like, no one's like, hey, no, I want to go back to copying and pasting 100 times a day, right? No one wants to do that.
So true, and yet still we find so many organizations are resistant to making those changes that would enable that. It's just really funny. But it's nice that you kind of bring that point up, because that is actually what we found in our report, is that the more digitally mature an organization, the more likely they are to have engaged, empowered, happy employees, because they're removing these barriers to their day-to-day work that really drain, at the end of the day, drain your energy, drain your inspiration, drain your creativity. And so I want to ask you, whether in your personal work experience or in a client organization you've worked with, how have you seen automation affect the employee experience?
Yeah, I mean, so automation in general, and of course there's lots of different types of automation, right? So whether it's sort of robotic process automation or implementing a BPM solution that enables better orchestration of a business process, versus Excel hot potato, is immensely liberating for employees, and enables better work productivity. As I said, we're working with a customer that in the manufacturing space where they have this master Excel sheet that had to be updated by I think 17 or 18 people for an order to be processed into the ERP system, right? And you can't enter the order unless every one of those fields has been filled out, and you've got to have a dozen odd people that are trying to modify this Excel sheet, right, to actually get that order inputted. And they replaced that with a BPM solution, right, that orchestrated this work across these 14 or 15 people, and you can't move to the next step unless you fill everything out, right? So it just streamlined that process where, okay, I've got something I need to do. It gets assigned to me. I have to do my task, and I promote it to the next person, and I never have to think about it again, versus having to go to that Excel sheet 5 or 6 times, or someone saying, hey, that's not filled out. Is that yours, or is that the other guys or the other girls, right? So it was immensely liberating for the employees, and it cut down the time to get those orders into the ERP system by I want to say more than 60%. It was something like 65% improvement, right? So just imagine the impact of that on the business itself, right? In terms of being able to turn around more things, and then improving sort of the overall productivity and morale of customers.
That is an insane story. Thank you for sharing. And also, Excel hot potato. This might be my new favorite phrase. So listeners, I have a challenge for you. If you want to make a Excel hot potato meme and either tweet it or put it on LinkedIn, tag me in Formstack. I will send you some Practically Genius swag for the best one. So please, let's see some Excel hot potato memes out there in the wild.
Right on. Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is these types of process reengineering exercises are great to do when you're modernizing your system, right? So we see there's a huge focus on taking kind of these legacy systems, mainframe systems, right, old school apps, and then migrating them, whether it's to the cloud or onto a low-code platform like Pega or OutSystems or Mendix, right? And as you're making these changes, whether you're kind of moving to a React or mobile apps or whatever sort of modern framework, it's a great opportunity to actually look at the process and not just address your technical debt, which typically these exercises do, but also understand process debt, which people often don't understand. So if you don't understand it, you can't do anything about it, right? And then you take this poorly performing process from a legacy system and migrate it to a new system, and you still have those process issues that you had in the old system.
Let's dig a little further in there, because I don't know if I've ever even thought about the term process debt. So please, do tell us more. Dig in a little bit.
Yeah, so this was actually coined by my colleague Scott Ritchie, who heads our partnerships teams at Pyze. And if you think about technical debt, right, we all understand that. I've got end of life applications that are hard to maintain. Every time I need to add a new feature, everyone's walking on eggshells because I might break something, or it's really, really hard to utilize a old system, right? So these are all kind of things that we understand to be technical debt. And when people are looking to modernize or digitally transform their system, you take these applications that run on these old systems and you move them to a new system. So process debt is very similarly understanding the inefficiencies of that legacy environment, or even your existing environment, right? Where are those ping pong effects? Where do escalations happen? Where are the bottlenecks or the hotspots in your process today? Because remember, like as I said, the process is enabled by the applications. So just by modernizing the applications, you don't wind up changing the process. Right, and if I want to improve the process, just like we're focusing on improving the technical capabilities of the application or the technical stack that we have in place, you want to do the same thing with processes in terms of understanding the current process. And then just like we don't address all the technical debt at once, you don't have to attack all the process debt at once, right? There's a roadmap that you can create and understand that, okay, as we move forward, maybe we will do a lift and shift and understand that these are the process improvements that we have to do. Or here's a process improvement that we can introduce in version 1 that's going to significantly increase the outcome of this modernization exercise. Because these modernization projects they run for long period of time. They can cost millions of dollars, and no CFO in the history of the world will ever want to write a 7-figure check for an upgrade, right? They're looking for business process efficiencies, and this is a great way of introducing those business process efficiencies.
And when it comes to identifying which processes to improve, to make better, to automate, insert whatever adjective you want there's a lot of teams that are competing for resources. There's a lot of different goals, different mindsets. So how, as either senior leadership or even as an entire organization, do you prioritize what you work on first?
Yeah, I think it's got to be driven by what's the most important thing to the business. Those are the projects that will always get the attention, or should get the attention in terms of resources, in terms of funding, right, and approvals to sort of move forward. And it's got to be business objective and goals driven, and not necessarily squeaky wheel driven, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get caught up in that part of it of, well, this is my issue and this is making my life terrible, and listen to me, help me. But you have to see that greater picture somehow, and at some point, or else it's just gonna keep being an issue.
Yeah, and it's sort of if it's data driven, those decisions become easier to make for leadership, right? So the hard thing is getting to that apples to apples comparison, so that you can make those decisions, and there's some iteration that's required, because we'll walk into organizations, and the bulk of our initial engagement is often kind of getting to understand which data is actually where. Right, especially with legacy systems, but once we get the pipelines hooked up, now you've got near real-time visibility, and as you make changes, you can see what the impact of those changes are. So it can be a fundamental shift in terms of empowerment to make decisions.
Empowerment to make decisions. I really like that phrase. I think if a lot of organizations thought that way, we'd probably solve a lot of these kind of internal employee struggles that we see over and over again. And so I have two final questions for you. This first one's a little loaded, but if you could tell an organization to invest in one initiative around automation, what would it be?
So, of course, I would go with you need to automate your process improvement capabilities, and I'm not saying that in a selfish way that you should go and invest in Pyze. It's important to understand your process before you make changes to it, right? Because you might wind up making the wrong decision. So think about it this way. I go to the doctor, and the doctor talks to me and says that, okay, I need to operate on your left kidney, and then takes me into the operating room, and they take out the left kidney, and it might be that my issue is with the right kidney, right? And so it's important to be able to do an MRI of the patient and identify exactly what the issue is, right? Is it the left kidney or the right kidney? And if it's the right kidney, well, what is the root cause of the issue, right? And based on the root cause, we might not need to operate. We might not need to, even kind of go in and do different things. Or the options that I have are based on sort of what the diagnosis is, right? And you can't do that without sort of doing an MRI, so to speak. So Pyze, in the same way, provides an MRI of an end-to-end process so that you know not just where to operate, but how to operate, right? Or what is it intelligent automation? Is it better business process orchestration? Is it robotic process automation, right? What is the right automation solution? Is it better training? And I don't need automation at all to address this issue, right? So once you have that understanding, and if you can automate that process of being able to have constant visibility into the business performance of that process, now you really have the power to continuously improve. It's
almost the idea of the holistic health of your business or organization. And also the reminder of to not make assumptions. I think that catches a lot of people up and causes a lot of mistakes. We assume we know the root of the problem, or we assume we think this, or we believe this, but we don't actually have the data to point out and say exactly, yes, this is the bottleneck, this is the issue, this is the breakdown between tools or people or departments. So I think those are excellent points. And going into our very last question. So as you know, the show is called Practically Genius. And the reason behind it is we believe that genius ideas are found all throughout organizations by all kinds of people. And those people who implement those practically genius ideas deserve to be celebrated. So what do you think creates a practically genius person? What are some attributes that go into these people who are able to bring these ideas to the surface in their organizations?
These questions are getting harder as we go. I think it's really has nothing to do with business, right? It's really kind of getting in touch with yourself, right? In understanding sort of what are your strengths. Like you could do in the corporate context a strengths finder exercise, right? But more plainly speaking, it's really about identifying sort of, what are your motivations, and now we're getting kind of at like a philosophical level, right? What drives you, what doesn't drive you, and trying to kind of assess the impact that you're having on whatever it is that you're doing, and trying to kind of think about how can I do that better. That's really the journey, right? Of sort of identifying problems and then devising solutions to solve those problems, right? Because as they say, need, right, is the mother of all invention. So if you can understand that need and why that need exists and how you relate to that need, you can then come up with a solution to solve that need.
Well, I think that's a phenomenal note to leave our conversation on. Well, Prabhjot, thank you so much for joining us today on Practically Genius.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay, for having me. I enjoyed the discussion, and talk soon.